Hey there, retro games fans, this is NDC from Pieces of 8-Bit. So the moment has finally arrived. I am going to talk you through getting a Raspberry Pi setup and getting a RetroPie build on there for you to emulate your games. So why would you want to do this? Well, ultimately the Raspberry Pi is a relatively inexpensive piece of equipment. It's a fantastic piece of equipment. It's incredibly powerful for the size of the device, but also for the cost of the device. And the nice thing about it is it's incredibly easy to use as a retro gaming device. You can use it for all manner of different things. You can use it as a little home computer if you want, as a media center. But I particularly like its use as a retro gaming setup. The advantage of this means that if you haven't got any old consoles anymore, but you've still got the games, or you've managed to find some things on abandonware or whatever, and you want to play those games again, this is a great way of getting yourself going with it. You can pop it under your television. It's relatively small, and also it means you're in full control of the games that are on there, and you're fully in charge of your sort of moral obligations from a licensing perspective as well. So yeah, let's dive straight in. What I'm going to do is talk to you a little bit about what you're going to need, and then I'm going to go through the setup with you. The software that I'm using will be on a Mac, but the setup is pretty much identical on Windows as well. Yeah, let's go have a look and see what sort of things we need to do to get ourselves set up and running. Okay, so let's have a look first of all to see what sort of things you are going to need to get yourself started. So there are a few things that you could be looking for in terms of Raspberry Pi, in terms of what you want to do for setup. So what we have here is the Raspberry Pi 4. So the Raspberry Pi format itself has really not changed very much. So there is a newer version now, which is the Raspberry Pi 5, which just has a slightly different configuration of the ports on the side here. So something to bear in mind in terms of the cases that you get for it. This one, I bought a little kit, a little cooling kit for it. So just some little stick-on coolers there, just to keep the device nice and cool. And the Raspberry Pi 4, which is the sort of the last generation, which I think you can still buy, is probably more than sufficient for playing anything up to really kind of the PlayStation 1 era, and a little beyond for some games as well. They do struggle a little bit with things like N64 and GameCube, but yeah, this is more than sufficient to get yourself going if you want something a little bit cheaper, or if you can lay your hands on an older one. If you could pick up a Raspberry Pi 5, which is a bit newer, then yeah, that's going to be a good bet for you. The other alternative is that you could pick up, so I haven't taken this out of here because I didn't want to have to put it back in, but this little device here is what's called a Raspberry Pi Zero. So this is a Raspberry Pi Zero 2, and that is basically a small, lower powered version of this, but obviously in a very small form factor, and the price of those is incredibly cheap. The advantage of this one, as you can see, it looks like a Game Boy cartridge, is that pairs with the GPI case, for instance, which looks a bit like a Game Boy. You can pop that in the back there, and this will play most sort of 90s consoles. So this will play things like the SNES, the Mega Drive, but also more importantly, and probably the thing you're going to want, it'll play those portable games as well. So the Game Boy games, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, those kind of things. So incredibly powerful for that little device. So even though you've got this big unit here with the batteries and everything else in it, the Raspberry Pi obviously was that little tiny device that you saw just before. The other thing you're going to need is case. So there are loads of cases out there. I will put a link to the Pi Hut, which is where I tend to get most of my stuff from, but you can find cases for Raspberry Pi on Amazon or whatever your sort of local Raspberry Pi vendor is. They will have all the cases as well. So this one here is quite an inexpensive one called NES 4 Pi. Obviously looks like a little sort of NES system. There are some better ones than this. So this is it's basically just a case, and it's got a little cooling fan inside it. But really, there are some better ones. If you want to spend a bit more money, there are some that come with sort of built-in power switches and that kind of thing. Worth pointing out actually that the Raspberry Pi 5 has better power options. So if you're looking for something that's a bit more flexible, I think it has a power off button, whereas this one doesn't. the way I've got around this, actually, not having the switches, I actually have this plugged into a smart plug. So I just tell my Echo device to actually turn it on and off. And you can buy leads with power switches built into them, all that kind of thing as well. Ultimately, it's not really that difficult to kind of work around that. And then finally, you're going to need one of these little SD cards, micro SD, and they just slot into, again, relatively inexpensive. They just slot into the bottom of the Raspberry Pi like so. And I will show you later on how to get all of the games and all the ROMs and everything else installed on there. And it is very, very simple. A couple of ways to do it, but it will largely depend on what build that you have. But I will explain all of that in a moment. There is, of course, another option which I've shown you before, which is you can go all out and go for something a little bit more interesting. So you can go for something like this. This is, oh, there we go. This is the problem I had last time. I get the light ring on here. This is called I'm just going to try and get it into the shot there. This is called a Pi-cade. And the Pi-cade is basically sort of a little arcade unit. It comes with all your customizable stickers and that kind of thing. And as you can see just here down in the bottom, there is our Raspberry Pi 4. And this represented a fantastic Saturday morning for me. It came in a beautifully packaged kit with all the buttons and the joysticks and all the extra electronics and everything else you needed. And it took me sort of 2 or 3 hours on a Saturday morning to sort of wire this all up and build the unit itself. Absolutely fantastic. If you're into Lego and gaming and arcades, which I'm sure most of you are if you're watching this channel, then this is a fantastic device. They cost around £200, but so it's quite expensive, especially when the Raspberry Pi itself is only about sort of £50, £50–60. So, but I absolutely love this. This is one of my favourite things. So it is just great fun to build, and the screen on it is absolutely beautiful. So this is the 10-inch screen version. There's an 8-inch screen version as well, which comes with a sort of a wider bezel around here. It just comes with the smaller screen. So and you set this up exactly the same way that you'll set the ordinary Raspberry Pi RetroPie build. And then finally, the very last piece is that you're going to need some cables. So you're going to need your power lead. So you've got your Raspberry Pi power lead. And I would recommend getting these when you buy the actual Raspberry Pi itself. Buy it from the same place. There's the proper legitimate Raspberry Pi leads. They are just USB-C. So I mean, by all means try different USB-C, but I've generally found that these to be the sort of best bet, really, the ones that the actual official Raspberry Pi ones. And then you will also need a HDMI lead, and these are sort of like essentially they come with like a little sort of USB on the one end and the HDMI on the other end. And again, it's not micro HDMI, so mini HDMI. So I would definitely, again, as you can see, that I don't know if I can get this in focus there, but you see the little Raspberry Pi logo on there. So buy the official lead. Definitely recommend it. It's not much more expensive. And then in terms of optional things, I would definitely recommend getting yourself a Bluetooth keyboard. Probably don't need a mouse, but certainly a Bluetooth keyboard. There's a lot of input that has to happen on the device, lots of configuration, putting in Wi-Fi passwords and that kind of thing. If you've got a wired, keyboard, you can just plug it into here as well, but it's quite cumbersome, so it's quite useful to have a little keyboard that you can just use for various things. Sometimes as well, especially if you're playing some older games like Commodore 64, Amiga, those kind of things, they do require keyboard input, and so it's definitely worth having the keyboard for ease of use. Otherwise it's just a real nuisance trying to emulate keyboards and all those kind of things. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to just pop this into the case that I've got here, and it is an incredibly easy installation. So we just got, for this particular case, and they're all standard, so if they're standard size, just 4 screws that go into the corners here, which I've already dropped one immediately. That's useful. I could really do with a magnetic screw here. I'm going to totally cause lots of problems here, aren't I? Wow. Okay, I think some editing might be in order here, so I'll come right back to you when I've installed these screws.
One eternity later.
Okay, so that's the screws in now. I think that has to be the hardest part of the entire installation, to be honest. So now we need to just hook up the little fan. So there's a couple of little jumpers on here that we connect to. So we're just going to plug those in there, like so. I already put the SD card in, and you can see there's a little slot at the back there for the SD card. So that's those in. So I am just going to quickly just double check that that actually all works. So let me grab my power supply here and plug that in over there. Oh, a close up of my face, I do apologise. There we go. So that's now starting up. So it is as easy as that. You know, like I say, the hardest part was getting the screws on. See the little fan going there. So that's, I guess, from your perspective, that's the red one on the left, the black one on the right, and it's just sort of one inside. But don't. I mean, I would just check the instructions before you go ahead and do that. Right, the Raspberry Pi is going to power from there. They'll all be the same, but it's always worth just checking anyway, just to make yourself 100% sure. Okay, so I'm just going to pull the plug on that. That's actually doing something, so probably not a wise move, but I'm going to do it anyway. So as far as the Raspberry Pi is concerned, and getting that connected and set up, that is it. And then with this particular case, there's no screws, it just clips on the top, and we're all good. There's a little flap that opens at the front for network if you want to use it, although it does have Wi-Fi capability, and the 4 USB slots for your game ports. Okay, so there you go. In terms of the RetroPie, this one, obviously, the Retro Flag GPI case setup again is quite straightforward. There's actually no screws here. It comes with this little thing here called a hat, and basically you connect the two things together. So you can see there's a little one of the little USB ports. There's a little ribbon cable that goes into that, and then it essentially folds around. And the way that the case is designed means that these little connectors here will make connection along the bottom here and provide all the necessary services to the device. And then, as you can see here, this is the reader that goes into the top here, so that passes all the information to the screen, and you get all of your button presses and power and everything else from the actual the case itself. So again, very, very, very straightforward. There are little screws that go in the back of here, which I have removed for the purposes of demonstration. So they will just pop back in there. This pops back in here, and if it had batteries in it, I would turn it on, but I suspect it probably doesn't. Oh, it does. It does. We're good. I suspect they won't be powerful enough to actually boot it. So this actually has a different install to what we're going to show you. So this has something called Recall Box on it, which is what I've generally found to be pretty good with the Retro Flag GPI case, and this one has RetroPie on it. Oh, I do actually have a good amount of battery in there. So both run something called Emulation Station, but I'll talk you through that again as well in a moment too. So I don't know if you can actually see that on the screen. There we go. So there we go. That's started up now. Fabulous. Okay, so there's all our different consoles that are available on that install. Okay, so I'm going to go over to the computer now and show you how to get your RetroPie build itself actually set up and installed. Okay, so we're going to have a look at getting our SD card set up for our Raspberry Pi device. So ultimately, there is really now only one tool that I think you need, and that is called Raspberry Pi Imager. You can get it from the Raspberry Pi site. I will put a link in the description. And what you're going to do in here is basically the first thing you're going to do is you are going to pick your Raspberry Pi device, and what we're going to do is we're going to do an erase of our card first, and we're going to pick the SD card itself. In terms of picking SD cards, try and pick something that's got, as a reasonably speedy one. If you buy the really cheap ones, you'll just find that it runs really slow. So yeah, get yourself a good like SanDisk or something like that. They're still relatively inexpensive. You don't need loads of storage unless you're putting lots of PlayStation 1 games or PlayStation 2 games on, which I wouldn't recommend anyway. PS1 games are okay, but obviously remember that they'll take sort of 500 megabytes up each because they're CD based. So they will fill up the space quite quickly. The other thing to bear in mind is that SD cards don't last forever, so make sure that if you're putting any ROMs that you've got that are precious, that you don't have your SD card as the only place where they are existing. So in this particular one, we're going to do everything from here. So we've picked the SD card reader that's in my machine, and we're going to skip through to the next step. So let's do yes on that. Obviously, if you want to, you can use the disk utility here, or you can use other tools in Windows, for instance, for doing this. So we've now erased the disk, and that it was as simple as that. So if we go down here, just across here, and open that up, our SD card is now empty and repartitioned. So that should, if I'm right, let's just do a get info on that. Here we go. So we've got 64 gig card, 64 available, and it's formatted to FAT32, which is what you need. So already the Raspberry Pi image has done all the hardware for you. Very, very straightforward. Next step then, again, we're going to pick Raspberry Pi 4. It doesn't really matter for that first step which you pick ultimately, but pick, for good measure, just pick the device that you've got. Now this is kind of the cool bit. So we can now, and obviously if you want to use this for anything else, you want to use it as a media player, or you want to put a full version of Linux on here, obviously you do this exactly the same thing. Come into here and you're going to pick the build that you want. So we're going to go to emulation in Game OS. And I mentioned before that I'd got Recalbox and RetroPie. I found Recalbox works better on the GPI case one that I've got with the Pi 02. I used to have a Pi 01 and I had RetroPie installed on that, but when I bought the Pi 02, I struggled with it. There was a few things that just didn't quite work right. So I tried Recalbox and it just worked really, really well. And it's the nice thing about Recalbox is it's easier to get the games onto it. It sort of creates a little sort of shared partition where you can drag and drop the games on your machine. Whereas RetroPie, I'll talk to you a little bit about how to get those on. It's a little bit more involved, but not too difficult, but slightly trickier than on the Recalbox. So we're going to pick RetroPie for this build. So we now need to find the RetroPie build that is for us. So it's going to be this one here, RetroPie 4.8, Raspberry Pi 4/400. The 400 is basically an all-in-one device that you can buy that's got a keyboard and everything else built on it. And by all means, you can pick one of those up. They are quite cool. So we're going to click on that. And then we're going to choose our newly formatted SD card reader. And we're going to click Next. Yes, we are sure. Okay, no peeking. I'm going to type my password in. Alright, and we're going to allow it access to the volume, and it's now going to go ahead and do that. So I will come right back to you as soon as that is done. So that's now done. It's a really quick process, and yeah, it merely takes I guess just a few seconds. I mean, that probably in total, it does a little verification piece as well. In total, that's probably 2 or 3 minutes to do on a, this is not the newest computer in the world, so yeah, pretty straightforward really. So yeah, that's it. And ultimately, in terms of the actual getting the device set up, that's all there is to it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to plug this in and we'll see it start up, and you can see what we need to do next. Okay, so we're going to boot up little Raspberry Pi machine. It takes a few minutes to boot up for the first time. I have already booted it up once just to check that everything was okay before recording, so we're in pretty good shape, so hopefully it will come up a little bit quicker. So it's just going to do some checks. It's going to try and connect to the network, which it won't be able to do, and get some updates. So I'm just going to leave you for a few seconds while that finishes booting up, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, so now it's going to start up Emulation Station. Emulation Station is basically what's managing all of your emulators. There won't be any games attached at the moment, and obviously, as you're seeing on the screen here, we don't have any game pads either. So we're going to get a gamepad connected. So first thing I will do is just connect that up. In terms of gamepads, there's lots and lots of options. Basically, if you've got something that's a USB pretty standard USB controller, that will work absolutely fine. I've bought a few controllers from Pi Hut, so I've got a couple of SNES ones, a couple of NES ones. You'll find other things work as well. So the USB controllers that you get with things like the PlayStation Classic will work. Your PS3 and PS4 controllers will also work, and in fact you can even set those ones up for Bluetooth as well, which is quite straightforward. So I've connected a SNES controller for now, so I won't have all of the buttons able to be mapped to my selection, but I'll show you the setup as I do this. So you see it just comes up as US gamepad. So I'm just going to go ahead and press all of the buttons here that correspond as I go. So I've got my D-pad, I've got A, B, X and Y, and I have a left and right shoulder, but I don't now have any of these other buttons, so all you need to do is basically just hold the button to skip through these. So I don't have a left and right trigger, I don't have any analog sticks on this controller. Obviously if I was using a PlayStation 3 or 4 or an Xbox controller, something like that, I absolutely would have. Wire controllers or Bluetooth are fine. There's no sort of preference either way really. They all work just as well. The only thing is the Bluetooth ones are a little bit trickier to set up. You didn't choose a hotkey button. This is required for exiting games. Do you want to use the select that button as default? So yes. That just helps us to get out of games. We need to. There we go. It takes a few seconds. Okay, so now we're in, and that's it. And at the moment, there's very little in here to see. So the first thing we're going to need to do is go and get ourselves connected to the internet. So I am just going to go and do that, and I will be right back with you. Okay, so I've connected to my Wi-Fi now. Obviously I didn't want to show you my Wi-Fi settings and password on an open YouTube channel, but one thing to bear in mind when you set it up, if you go to the Wi-Fi settings, it will actually guide you to this anyway, but you will need to set your region, so there is just an extra step. I'll show you quickly how to do that. So if you go to Raspi-config, and you come down to the localization options here, and now the way that these menus work here is slightly weird. So what you do is, if you're using the controller, so for instance I've used the SNES controller, I'm going to click A, which will select that option, and you'll see sorry, B even. So I already got it wrong. So select B, which selects that option, then I'm going to scroll down to select, so I select B, oops. Oh, sorry, no, actually that's incorrect. What you actually do is you press right on this controller. So it is slightly confusing. That's what I was doing earlier. So you can see if I scroll on localization, push right on my D-pad, it takes me down to the select button there, and then I'm just going to press the A button on there. Sorry, B button on there. That's it. It is a bit confusing because the controllers are slightly different on these menus, and even though I've navigated them 1,000 times, I sort of do it without my head turned on really. So I want to set the WLAN country. So again, I'm going to push right on the D-pad, and then I am going to press the B button on there, and then I'm going to go down here and find the country that I am in. Not Bosnia and Herzegovina. That's scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. Thankfully, the UK is under G for Great Britain rather than U for UK, because there is no quick way to get to the bottom. And I'm going to click right again on the D-pad, go to OK, and then I am going to press that B button again, and press the B button again, and that is it. So hopefully I haven't inadvertently disconnected myself. So go to finish, and then I go to reboot if I want to reboot. So I've already done that, so I'm not going to do that right now. Okay, so if we want to set up our PS3 controller, what we're going to want to do is go to RetroPie Setup here. So click on A there. That's going to take us to a menu with a load of options actually. This allows us to install all sorts of things, in fact. So what we're going to do for this, or for any other sort of Bluetooth controllers that aren't already available in there, we're going to go to Manage Packages, and we're going to go down to Driver here. and we're going to go down to PS3 controller here. So, and you can see there's other controllers that we can also install from here as well. So we're just going to go ahead and add that. Install from source. Yes, please. That's going to go and install everything it needs for the PS3 controller. It's worth bearing in mind that if you've got your PS3 controller hooked up to the Raspberry Pi with a USB cable, then you can just use it as any other USB controller. But this is obviously if you want to set that up as a Bluetooth controller. So I'm just going to let that install and then I'll come right back to you. Okay, so that is now done. It's worth, while we're in here, we can actually have a look at some of the options that are also available in the config here. So if we want to install any other packages, we can do. We can do any updates in here as well. So if we go into our main packages here, you can see there are all of the emulators in here. So there are some that won't be installed, which we can do. So if we go to optional, we can see there's some other ones here. There's some main ones. Those are typically arcade emulators. There's mean for all PSP PPS SPP 154. That is a PSP emulator. You can see the standard PSP emulator is already installed there. ScumVM is installed. SNES 9X. SNES is already installed, so you don't need to worry about that. Most of the things you will need will be installed. It's only really if you want to install something slightly unusual, you will probably find it there. So, you know, like for instance, I used to have a Dragon 32 back in the day. There is a Dragon 32 emulator which you can install from there as well. But go and have a look online at what the best sort of emulators are for the system that you're trying to emulate. If it's not available, you can go and set that up in there as well. Okay, so if we go all the way back out of here, incidentally on that menu there are also update options as well. So if you want to go and run a full update of the system, you can do that. I won't do that just now because that takes quite a long time to run, and there's no real need. It should be pretty up to date as we've just installed from the Imager tool anyway. Okay, so if we go back up to Bluetooth, just the final piece on the Bluetooth controller here. So if we pair and connect a Bluetooth device now, and we put the PlayStation 3, if that's the one we're using, controller into pair mode, then we should be able to see that appear as an option that we can then connect to. So that's how we do that. That's it for setting the controllers up. So the thing that I guess you're probably all desperate to know really is, how do I get my games onto the Raspberry Pi? So just a recap of where we've got to so far. So we've got our Raspberry Pi, we've put it in our case, we've used the Raspberry Pi Imager to create the RetroPie image on our SD card. We've put our SD card into our Raspberry Pi and we've powered it on. We've set Bluetooth up for PlayStation 3 controllers by installing the drivers, and we have set the Wi-Fi up. So but first of all setting the region, and then going and connecting to the Wi-Fi. We're going to the Wi-Fi option on the menu, and that will then allow you to pick your Wi-Fi and enter your password. Obviously I didn't show you that piece for security reasons. So yes, let's go and set our games up. So there are a few ways of doing this. So I'm now going to go back to the desktop to basically show you what we need to do next. Okay, so we're back on our desktop, and we want to include some ROMs. If you watch my abandonware video from before, you might choose to go and get some ROMs from the abandonware site. There are other places you can go and get ROMs for backup purposes. There are videos out there that show you how to pull the ROMs from your own discs as well. Obviously if you own that software, then you can sort of go back up those ROMs and use those to pop into your emulator. Ultimately, how you source your ROMs, I don't really want to know. Do what you think is right, and and get yourself some ROMs to put on your emulators. Now, basically, the way to get those games, ROMs, I've been calling them ROMs. For those of you who aren't in the know, that is basically just what we're calling the game image files, which you want to use to include on your device, on your Raspberry Pi. So what we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves a USB stick. Now, there are three ultimately distinct ways of getting games onto your RetroPie or Recall box install. I'm going to go through probably the most straightforward one for RetroPie. Most people will probably use RetroPie, and so this is the easiest way of getting RetroPie consoles set up with your game ROMs. So what you're going to do is get yourself a USB stick, and you are going to make sure that that USB stick is formatted to FAT32. Or exFAT, I think also works, but yeah, certainly. In fact, let's just have a look here so we can just be sure what it is that we've got. So there we go, look, FAT32. That's going to be the most compatible, so that will be the format that I'd recommend. This is a 16 gig stick that I've got in here. Doesn't have to be that big. You might only be putting a few SNES games on, in which case you might need nothing more than a few hundred, few hundred bytes, kilobytes really. But a relatively small thumb drive or USB drive is going to be sufficient. So on that drive, what you're going to do is you're going to create some folders. So you're going to create a folder called RetroPie. You're going to create a folder called BIOS, and you're going to create a folder called Configs and one called ROMs. Now, the configs, probably don't really need to do a great deal with that one at the moment. If you want to do some more advanced things later on, and you want to fiddle about with some of the settings and that kind of thing, you want to edit those on your desktop rather than having to fiddle about with it on the Raspberry Pi, then you can set some configs to send over to the device or receive back from the device, which you can then subsequently edit. Generally speaking, for the majority of you, if you're going to be playing mostly emulated consoles such as SNES, NES, those kind of things, there really isn't much to do here other than just put new ROMs on. You may occasionally need BIOS, so some systems, the actual software that runs the consoles themselves or the computers themselves is either in copyright or needs to be installed separately. So in other words, it's not freely distributable within the actual emulators themselves, in which case what you need to do is go and get BIOS files. Some examples of that, or the most well-known example of that, is the Amiga. The Amiga will require some BIOS files in there for something called Kickstart ROMs, and without those you won't be able to start up the Amiga emulator. And the reason for that is that the Amiga Kickstart ROMs are still in production to this day. There is a community that keeps them up to date, and therefore if you want to use them, you need to purchase them for a relatively small fee. So if you want to do that, you can absolutely do that. The other example is Neo Geo. That's another one that also requires BIOS. There are a few platforms out there that require BIOS files. If you need those, generally go and have a look on the web as to where you need to put them and how you need to format them and what you need to do. But typically they're just files which will drop in this BIOS directory here. You can see I've got the Amiga ones set up there already, and they are just dropped into that file. So I've got the Kickstart ROMs there sitting in that folder, and that is all I need for the Amiga BIOS. Okay, so the most important thing then is your ROM. So within your ROMs, basically the way that the RetroPie setup will work is that if it spots games in a particular folder, it will enable that emulator therefore to run. So in here, basically once you install it for the first time, I think it will go and create a lot of these folders for you. But basically, these are all the folders that you want, and essentially, for all the consoles that you want to install, you can go ahead and create the folders in here for them. Generally speaking, if you look on some of the RetroPie forums, it will tell you what the folder structure is for the particular console that you want. So you can see some ones in here that you'll recognize: C64, Game Gear, which is the Sega. These are the arcade ones here: MAME, Libretto, Advanced MAME, MAME for All. Master System, Mega Drive, N64, NES, PC Engine, PSP, PSX, Sega CD. I don't think I've got any Sega CD games in here, so I don't know why that one's there, or 32X for that matter. In fact, I don't think anybody has any 32X games out there. Shout out to anybody that does. That's dedication to the Sega cause for sure. And snares. Yeah, Vectrex I don't have either. So I think the system has created some folders in here for me automatically. But I do have a lot of ROMs. Yeah, basically that's it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our ROMs, so wherever you've got those stored, and we're going to put them into the corresponding folders in here. Once we've done that, we're going to eject the USB stick, and we're going to take that USB stick and we're going to pop it into our Raspberry Pi. Like I said, go and get some ROMs from Abandonware if you want to just give it a quick try. You know, watch my Abandonware video if you want my opinions on Abandonware and whether you should or shouldn't use it. Yeah, go by all means, go and grab yourself some there, especially if you already own the games anyway. Then you know that's not too bad. So go and grab those ROMs, you download them, and then pop them into the corresponding folder in here. Take that USB stick, and we're going to go pop that into our Raspberry Pi USB port, and I will show you what happens when that happens. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to restart Emulation Station. So just to recap, what I've done is I've added, well, I actually had some games on the USB stick in the Atari folders, which is why you're just seeing the word 7800 in the background there. That was actually from my Lego build that I did before, and I didn't take the games off. So when I plugged it in and did it, all I got was Atari games. So what I've done is I've gone and got myself a ROM, which is the Super Hang-On game for the Mega Drive / Genesis, and I've added that. That's a game I own for the Mega Drive, so I figured that would be a good one to put on here to demonstrate how this works. So I put that into the Mega Drive folder in the ROM section, if you remember. Genesis will also work as a folder name. It recognises that, same as it does for Mega Drive, as they were called Genesis in the US and Mega Drive kind of elsewhere. So we're going to go to quit. So you press start, go to quit, press the A button, restart Emulation Station. It's going to ask us if we're sure. We're going to click yes, and that is now going to go and recatalog all of our games. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we are going to see Mega Drive. There it is. So Mega Drive has now appeared. So we've added one game in there, and Mega Drive has appeared. So really, really easy. Went and found the ROM. Obviously, if you've got CDs, you can pull the ROMs yourselves, or you can go and find the backup copy out there on the web for games that you own, or you can go to Abandonware if you feel comfortable doing that. You're going to put those into those folders on that USB drive, and then you're going to just literally just plug that USB drive into your Raspberry Pi device that you've got, and mine has got a little light on it which will flash to say that it's transferring. Then when it's stopped, you're going to restart that Emulation Station, and that will give you that will basically enable the emulator, if you like. So let's click into that. You can get it set up so that it will give you little previews and some little box art and things like that if you want to. But for the purposes of demonstration, I'm just going to show you that game fresh out of the box and onto my Raspberry Pi device. Here we go. So we can play, let's go for a new game. We're going to go arcade mode. And there we go. That's it. So there you go. And you can add all of your games that way. What I would suggest you do is go and collect all of the games that you want, put them in the correct folders, and that's it. And you should be good to go. And there you go. So once you've got that sorted out, now I've got to work out what the... yes, there we go. This was an amazing game. I used to love this back in the day. Controls are a little bit weird, okay. but you get the idea, okay. So and you should be good. I'm clearly not pressing the right buttons there, am I? That might take a bit of getting used to. One thing worth bearing, oh, that's the brake. One thing worth bearing in mind is that there are options as well. I'm going faster now. I think I did it wrong. There you go. Anyway, I'm not reviewing that game right now. So yeah, maybe we'll look at Super Hang-On at another time. It is an absolutely fantastic game, but yeah, not for today. This is absolutely not a game review. So yeah, so that's ultimately really it. I mean, you can go and get whatever games you like and get those loaded onto the memory stick and get those updated there. And obviously, you can find those games. If you've got discs, you might be able to pull those games, rip those games across for the emulators. But go and build up a kind of collection of things that you want to put on there and do it all in one go rather than one at a time. There are some other setup options which you can have a play with. I won't go into the depths of it. There is so much that you can configure with the Raspberry Pi with this RetroPie build, but ultimately. You can, just from the emulation settings here, emulation station settings, there are things you can do. So there's a scraper, and what the scraper will do is that will go and get things like artwork and descriptions of the games. I did have a quick go at doing this with the Super Hang-On game earlier. It didn't work, so I'm not going to show you that, but it typically does work. I've definitely seen this on other Raspberry Pi builds that I've got, where I've got a lot more games. It is a really quite useful feature. It even has things like ratings and stuff like that on there. There's things like you've got your sound settings. This is particularly useful for things like the Picade. So what I found with the Picade is that because I typically want to play things like arcade games on there, if I've got the Picade switched on and it's like, for instance, it's sitting on the bar in the garden, you don't want it really loud all the time. So some of the arcade games, when they're in the sort of insert coin screens, they actually sort of play a bit of music or a bit of sound, and obviously if that's really loud, that can be quite distracting. So that's quite useful, especially if you're not playing on a PC. And you don't have access to sort of volume controls and things like that, then that's worth setting. A few other bits and pieces there as well. UI settings, yeah, not much in there really. You can change the theme if you want to. There are other themes that you can download from the web. To be honest with you, I quite like the default theme. There are, if you look around on the web, there are some sort of canned setup files that you can find for RetroPie, which give you sort of like a 80s styling theme and some music and whatever at the start, and sort of background music and that kind of thing. And they are really, really cool. I have used those before, but they can be a little bit troublesome. So, you can have some issues with, some of the emulation, because there'll be certain settings that are applied that means that some games or whatever don't work as you expect. And so you have to tinker about with it a little bit. But they are quite cool if you want to do that sort of thing. To be honest with you, I just kind of want to play the game, so I don't really mind if it's sort of the vanilla setting. What else have we got here? So game collections allow you to kind of group things together. Yeah, most of these things really I don't tend to play with. This is all in Emulation Station itself. And if I just come back out of there, you can go and obviously change the settings for the controller that you've got plugged in. Let's come right back out of this. So B. If you go across to the screen that we saw before this one, obviously here you can set your Bluetooth up. Emulation Station themes, which I mentioned before, you can download those from here. And there's other things as well. I mentioned before about the ability to be able to add extra emulators. All that sort of thing can be done in here. Setting up your Wi-Fi, any other Bluetooth devices such as keyboards, all of those kind of things can all happen in here. For the most part, I don't think you'll typically need it. So what we'll do in a moment is we'll go to just to summarize the setup. But hopefully, I'm kind of waffling here really. That probably not really telling you anything further more useful. Just really go and have a look around on the web as well for configuration options and setup. There is lots and lots of things that you can do in here, but like I say, for the most part, you probably won't need it. Ultimately, the only time ever really that I tend to change configuration is if I'm starting a game up, and it'll sort of say press any button to config. You click that button, and then you can do things like you can change the emulator. That is quite useful for things like arcade games, where different versions of the MAME emulator will support different games. So it's not, you know, just having the latest one doesn't necessarily mean that that will play all of the games. So sometimes you have to tinker around with that a little bit and fiddle about with the settings in there. But generally speaking, most out-of-the-box consoles, NES, SNES, Mega Drive, Master System, all of those sort of consoles, they will just work straight out of the box with the emulators that come with RetroPie and emulation stations. Okay, well, hopefully that was useful for you. I'm just going to do a quick recap just to kind of just cover off what we did. There was a lot of content in there, so obviously if I do a quick recap, then you can always go back and just check the detail if you want to. And then we'll talk about what's coming up next, and then that'll be it for today. So, in terms of recap then, so just a reminder of what it is that you need to get yourself. So you need to get yourself, obviously, a little case. These are relatively inexpensive, these ones, as I mentioned. You can spend a bit more if you want to. In here is our Raspberry Pi, if I can actually open the thing. There it is. So there's our Raspberry Pi. These are somewhere in the region of about £50–60, I guess the equivalent in dollars. They're a little bit harder to come by in the States apparently, but yeah, that's this one particular is a Raspberry Pi 4. You're going to need yourself an SD card. Don't scrimp on your SD cards. Get a reasonably decent one. A SanDisk one will do you some good. Relatively quick one if you can. You probably won't need a lot. Depends on what sort of games you're putting on, as I mentioned before. So that's what you'll need. You'll need your power supply and the HDMI lead. And I would generally recommend getting those from the same place that you buy your Raspberry Pi from. You can, of course, get yourself something like this, a little GPI case. These are fantastic little devices. These are £50–60, and a Pi Zero, again, relatively cheap at sort of between $15 and $20 pounds. And you will also need a game controller or multiple game controllers if you want. So you can see this one will look very familiar. This looks like a SNES controller. Again, I think I paid about £4 for this. I think this was relatively cheap. Looks like a SNES one. Obviously it's not. Has a USB connector on the end. Anything like this will work with the Raspberry Pi. Again, bought this from the same place. But any kind of Raspberry Pi controller, I've got a NES one, I've got a Mega Drive one, I've got some PlayStation ones. They will all work. Standard USB controllers will typically work. Even the USB controllers, the wide USB controllers that I've got for the Switch, the official Nintendo ones, will also work with this. As I mentioned before, you can also, if you want to, set Bluetooth up. You'll need the PS3 drivers if you're using the PS3 controller from that optional settings part under Raspberry Pi config. Get the driver installed, then you can search for the Bluetooth device and add your PS3 controller. Just as easily, you can just have your PlayStation 3 controller wired up to the Raspberry Pi if you want to, if that's just easier, if you don't want to kind of repair it to anything else. So that's the hardware. In terms of the software, then you're going to go and find yourself Raspberry Pi Imager, works on Windows and on Mac. That will allow you to format your card how it needs to be formatted. It allows you to pick the Raspberry Pi version that you've got. So in my case, Raspberry Pi 4 or 5 or 3 or whatever you pick. Also, all the zeros are on there, the Pi 0, the Pi 02. And then pick the OS, the operating system software that you want to use. So that's going to be, for this video, that's going to be RetroPie. As I mentioned before, in the GPI case, I'll use Recalbox. And if you want to, you can buy many Raspberry Pis and install whatever you like on there. So the Debian Linux system, for instance, is on there. It's all freely available. It's a really robust installation process. Click the button, let it do its thing, take the SD card out, plug it in your Raspberry Pi, power it on, and you are good to go. It is as simple as that. Obviously, you're going to want to build yourself a games collection up if you don't have one already. So go and grab the ROMs that you need, but obviously based on, of course, the ROMs that you own. And pop those into the correct folders on your USB stick, as mentioned before. So, for instance, if it's a Mega Drive or Genesis, you're going to put them in the Mega Drive or Genesis folder, NES folder, the SNES folder for your SNES games, and you're going to plug that USB stick in, restart Emulation Station. That will catalogue them all, and the emulators will just appear as if by magic. Once you're in the RetroPie setup, you can do things like, as I mentioned before, you can do the scraping, your UI settings, your audio settings, all of those kind of things. But you can also go into the more detailed config and tweak a whole bunch of other stuff in there. But generally speaking, as I mentioned before, you probably won't need to do that, and so you can probably just kind of ignore a lot of that stuff. If you do get stuck, there is loads of guidance out there on the web. There is a huge Raspberry Pi, RetroPie community out there, and they are all very friendly people, and they will all help you to get what you need. And there was lots of guidance out there. So hopefully that was all really useful for you. And you are going to go away now and get your Raspberry Pi if you don't have. Go buy one if you don't have one, or dust off your Raspberry Pi, get your RetroPie install on there. And build that arcade machine that you've always wanted. Definitely better than going out there and buying the 40,000 games in one device. You're going to get, you're much more in control of what you put on there, and it is just, for me, a much better experience. And the games are the games, you know, they're the proper games. They're not sort of ripped off versions or anything else like that. So if you own the ROMs but you don't own the console, this is definitely a great way to get yourself started. So go and enjoy doing that. So coming up on the channel, I will be doing the Colin McRae Rally Times Challenge very soon. I've only got another week to get that done, so I'm going to review the game at the same time, I think, because it is a really fun game to play and a game that I really enjoy. You know, it's sort of the first of an amazing series of rally games that followed the Colin McRae series. Great rally games. So going to do a review of that, so keep an eye open for that. The unboxing video that I did for the Asus ROG Ally X proved to be my most popular video yet, and so what I've decided that I'm going to do is a kind of honest review, especially from the perspective of a retro gamer. So you know, I've been by the point I get to actually do the review, I'll have had it for a few weeks to a month, so I should be able to give you a fairly honest review of what I think and how I got on with the device, in particular with a focus on getting kind of retro games up there and running, but also looking at some of the latest games and how well they run on the device. It is a great bit of kit so far, so I'm going to just give you a review on that as well. So that's all coming up, and at some point I will actually get back to doing some game reviews, which is kind of my purpose in life of being here and having this channel, so do not fear. And I'm going to be doing some newer ones. I did say I would be looking at some newer ones, so I've got a few lined up that I'd really like to kind of play and show you on the channel, so keep your eyes peeled for those as well. There will also be just a hint as well, there will be some more road trips coming up as well, because I just love doing them, but it's also because I quite like putting those on the channel too. So all of that to come up, loads and loads of things to do. Absolutely not enough time with a full-time job to do all these videos and editing, but I seem to somehow manage to do it. I do love it, that's why I do it. So hopefully you love it too, so you'll give me a like and subscribe down the bottom there somewhere, I don't know where, approximately down there. Click that bell icon and give me a subscribe, and if you like this video, hit the like button too. Yeah, that's it from me for today. So until the next time, take care of yourselves, and I will see you around. Bye for now.